Let's go. What's up, y'all? Good to be back. Tonight we're covering Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, 1607, 1608 play. This is a little different. And I thought it would be good to get back into Shakespeare. We can always fall back on Shakespeare like we do here. And so good to see you all back here for some based literary analysis. Thanks for being here, y'all, on a Tuesday, day after uh, happy birthday, America. Right. So thank you for being here. And tonight we're going to go back into Shakespeare. This is a totally different. Yeah, Jeff, it should be some high speed, internet. So we should be good tonight, you guys. Hopefully, knock on wood, touch wood, as they say, right? Because we're doing an English play set, of course, in Egypt and Rome. We should be good with all our connection and our audio and our video. So let me know how it goes. Y'all, before we get going, obligatory smash that like. Yes, please smash that like. Please share the stream to everybody. Everybody you know. Let's get them on board, y'all. We got over 100 subs now. We're getting up, we're getting up to our 1,000 sub party. And it's going to be a busy week this week, y'all. So please make sure that you see the links in the channel description and the video description, and that my beautiful, wonderful mods are dropping throughout for Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. Please support me, y'all. I know it's hard out there. It's hard out there for everybody, but yeah, it's hard. We gotta do what we can. So thank you, everybody who supported me, and thank you for continuing to support me. You can support me at any time by dropping a link. By dropping a donation in one of the links. And of course, I will give you a shout out, answer questions, whatever you want. Okay. And when we get to that 1,000 sub stream, we're going to do a Caddyshack analysis, hopefully maybe a table read with some Kangs. And we got a busy week this week. Just before I jump into Antony and Cleopatra, thank you. If you're brand new here, thank you for joining. Thank you for hanging out with us. We got a high IQ audience and a group of people here. So thank you so much. And yeah, we got a big schedule this week. So tomorrow night, y'all, please join me again, 6:00. We're going to have our homeboy, West Lexicon Media from Alternate Current Radio. All of you all the OGs will especially know ACR because you're there from the old days with JD from Boiler Room, ACR, right? With Hesher, Spore, all of those high IQ Kangs and Queens. So, yeah, it's cool that we're going to have West Lex back, and we're going to be analyzing a film called The Bell-Even Architect, 1987, which is going to be really, really cool. It's going to be awesome. And I've had some help with that from my homeboy, Jeff, who gave me a great take on that film. So shouts out to Jeff out there. Then we're going to have Thursday. We're going to have our homeboy, TGF, the Green Feathers. And I'm really looking forward to this one also because we're going to be covering the troubles in Northern Ireland. And we're going to be talking about intelligence ties, collusion, the state, the elites, black ops, intel, and basically an area of recent and current history that a lot of people, especially, if you're an American, you may not be that familiar with, but it's going to be really, really cool. And it's certainly relevant to the world in which we find ourselves now. Shouts out to my sis out there. I love you, little sis. Shouts out to Natesky, to Kristen. Shouts out always to Kristen at Slowboy Whiteboard and all the homeboys. Thomas Henderson, I love you, Kang. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. So thank you for being here. We're also going to have another couple streams. I'm starting a little mini series on. I don't know if it'll be a mini series. I mean, maybe we'll keep going. But the first one, and this is thanks to Rachel Wilson at Based Homeschool Mom, who gave me this idea. And we're going to be doing music analysis. Of course, we do literary analysis here, so we're basing our music analysis in literature and in books. In the written word, we're going to be analyzing song lyrics. And I'm trying to. I think I'm going to, the point of it is to stick to analyzing song lyrics with an esoteric or occult bent, or at least heavy symbolism, and certainly music that you think, or you may have always thought is about one thing, but it turns out when we look at the lyrics, it may be about something else. And I thought that we would start. This is going to be. I'm actually going to start this probably, if I can. I'm going to do it tonight. Depends on, we're all going to be after this. Coach Easy, Church of the Eternal Logos, going to be streaming. Then we got Jay's analysis. And then if that doesn't go too late, I'm going to go into it. If not, I'll do it tomorrow in the afternoon. And we're going to start with Stairway to Heaven, using Richard Cole's Stairway to Heaven book, biography, and Hammer of the Gods by Stephen Davis. And the actual lyrics to Stairway to Heaven, which I have in this book right here. So I think that'll be really interesting. I think that'll be something cool that people will dig. And then I'll announce I've got a lot of ideas for other songs that we're going to do as we go on. All right. So that being said, again, thank you, everybody. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for looking at those links. Thanks for supporting me. And I hope you continue to support me. Thank you so much. And shouts out to Blocksky. Tonight, again, we are doing Antony and Cleopatra. Okay, so you may ask why. Yes, my sister says, I thought for sure it'd be Soul Asylum. I'm actually thinking about doing a Soul Asylum song that I was discussing. But I'll get to that later. So yeah, we're doing Antony and Cleopatra. And if you know this channel, of course, all my homies know this channel. We've done Shakespeare extensively. We began this whole channel with Shakespeare and Macbeth. And we've done Macbeth, we've done Hamlet, we've done Julius Caesar, we've done Richard III, we've done various speeches, Henry V, etc. Too many to name off the top of my head, but I thought that I would dive into something completely different, because something that would sort of challenge us, challenge me, challenge us, and that would be this 1608 play, Antony and Cleopatra. Now, you may never have even heard of this play. Of course, everybody's heard of Mark Antony. We've done, again, Julius Caesar here. We've done the Mark Antony, Friends, Romans, Countrymen funeral oration. Everybody's heard of Cleopatra. But I thought that it would be interesting because, we're doing literary analysis and we're always going to sort of fall back on Shakespeare, right? Because we can always rely on him in terms of looking at literature from a different perspective and looking at literature that is packed with meaning, right? And form plus content equals meaning. That's right. Thomas Henderson says the Western canon begins and ends with Shakespeare. That is absolutely true. So I thought that I would do a play that not many people know. And it's not just us. We are not the only ones who don't really know this play. I mean, Antony and Cleopatra is not performed that often. In fact, it's the second longest of Shakespeare's plays. Hamlet is the longest. We've done Hamlet here. And I always assumed, I guess from my reading, that I always in my head push King Lear up there for the monumental Shakespearean text. We're going to do King Lear soon. And it is up there, but Antony and Cleopatra actually is the second longest of his texts. And that's interesting because this play defies classification. Okay. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to take you through some scholarly introductions to the play. I'm going to take you through the plot, what happens. We're going to compare the actual historical figures. We've got the triumvirate, right? There's Lepidus, Octavian, or later Augustus Caesar, and his sister Octavia. There's Mark Antony, Cleopatra, Enobarbus, and the great Agrippa. A number of different characters in this that are, they're all historical figures. But one thing that Shakespeare, of course, does is he takes the historical events and he makes them their own. So we're going to talk about the sources for the play, and we're going to talk about, of course, the themes and why we would look at this play in the first place. This play is interesting because in postmodern exegesis, you tend to think of how Cleopatra is sort of a misunderstood character. And one great thing about Shakespeare is that he defies that exegesis. She is misunderstood, but Shakespeare makes sure that she's misunderstood purposefully. And we're going to talk about some of the symbolism of the play and how it relates to us now, especially in terms of the power structure of the world, the elites, war, and of course, love. Because this is when people think of Shakespearean love stories, of course, they think of Romeo and Juliet, which we've covered. They may even think of the relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, right? Because that, as Harold Bloom says, that's one of the great all-time couples in Shakespeare. But Antony and Cleopatra is a completely different animal. And that is because their love is more of an eros, but it is one that has to be seen in the context of the macrocosm of the historical events that were happening, especially the Battle of Actium and the fall of Ptolemaic Egypt. Cleopatra is the last of the Ptolemaic pharaohs, and especially one that is relatable today because their love story is incredibly complex, and it brings out the sort of dichotomy between the will and reason, which those two things are at war with Mark Antony, inside of Mark Antony. And also Mark Antony and Cleopatra, in a way, are the perfect mirrors or perfect, manifestations of Mars and Venus, right? Of Ares and Aphrodite. If anybody in literature it seems to be these two characters. They love each other and they hate each other, right? So let's get this, get this dude out of here. Peace. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss the plot. We're going to discuss the historical events. And I'll just start this out with a quote from the play and from Mark Antony. It says, "To kiss those lips, I will appear in blood. I and my sword will earn our chronicle." It's from Act 3, Scene 8. And what that means, essentially, is that, didn't Mark Antony play Marlon Brando? Yes, Marlon Brando played Mark Antony. What's up to Mowgli? So let's start with some my thesis statement for this, which is essentially that that one of the lines in this play is that relates to the gap in nature, and there are a number of themes in this play, but one of those is the gap between Rome. This is pre-imperial Rome, post-republican Rome. This is post-Julius Caesar, and remember that this play is a sequel in a sense. It's not a straight sequel, but it is a sequel to Julius Caesar. It takes place a number of years later, and we know that. Remember, at the end of Julius Caesar, the triumvirate has defeated Brutus and Cassius, and now we have Mark Antony, who is one of the members of that second triumvirate, and he is going second triumvirate or third triumvirate. Second triumvirate. And he's going to run off basically to Egypt. And in the beginning of the play, he is sort of languishing in Egypt with Cleopatra. Mark Antony also has a wife, Fulvia, back home in Rome. He learns of her death. And this is like sort of, obviously good news to Cleopatra. But it requires Mark Antony to go back to Rome to handle some business, right? And he's got to handle some business with the other two members of the triumvirate, Lepidus and Octavian. Now, Octavian represents all that Rome has to offer. And he obviously, the soothsayer will play a part in this because he's going to tell, Mark Antony that, listen, you are more valorous than Octavian, right? You have more courage. You're more of a man on the outside. You're older. He's more battle hardened. He's wiser. But his demon, as he calls it, his spirit, is afraid of Octavian because Octavian is wilier. Octavian is more of a, as Shakespeare calls it in Hamlet, a Machiavel. And we know from sort of, we know through dramatic irony that, of course, Octavian is going to win. So again, one of the great examples of dramatic irony, because we know no matter what happens that Mark Antony's going to die, Cleopatra's going to die, and that Octavian is going to take over. He's going to win at the Battle of Actium. But that's not really the point. The point is to see how we get there. And I don't mean that in the sense of, what's the guy's name? Alan Watt. The journey is more important than the destination. It's not. We're not talking that. We're talking the complexity of human beings and the power plays and the inner struggles of how they achieve this. And let's go ahead and get started here. This says, yes, thanks for being cool in the chat, everybody. So let's see. This says, Egyptian enchantress. In Antony and Cleopatra, Shakespeare turned to a theme that had long fascinated the world and would continue to excite interest for centuries to come. Long before Shakespeare, Englishmen had an available account of Cleopatra and her lover Antony in Geoffrey Chaucer's Legend of a Good Woman. An odd place for an enchantress like the Egyptian queen to appear. But Chaucer conveniently forgot a portion of her history to reveal her as an example of faithful love. Later writers retold the story with varying interpretations until Cleopatra was as familiar to Englishmen as the most popular folk heroine in their country. Shakespeare's play dates from 1607, and it's sort of based on another guy, Sir Edmund Chambers' play from 1606, but Shakespeare makes it wholly his own. The main source of information about Antony and Cleopatra for the Elizabethans was Plutarch, which I have right up there. But again, Shakespeare makes this completely his own. And it says, henceforth, dramatists in search of plots based on historical episodes in this ancient world had only to turn to Plutarch, where they could find not only facts that picturesque detail and colorful language. This work was the main source for Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, though he may have found a few incidents and suggestions in other easily available classical works. Hamlet, with 3,929 lines, is Shakespeare's longest play, but Antony and Cleopatra comes close with 3,059 lines. Let's see. We must remember that the act and scene division familiar in modern texts was an innovation by the earliest editor, Nicholas Rowe. The first folio of 1623, which was published 7 years after Shakespeare's death in 1616, gave only a hint of act and scene division by printing Act 1, Scene 1. So one thing about the form of Shakespeare that we've covered before is that Shakespeare in his texts does not include act and scene divisions. We know that because of either rhyming couplets at the end of a scene, or we know it because of what happens on stage, right? Another thing is that Shakespeare rarely puts stage directions in his plays. He'll put his most famous stage direction, which I've covered before, is exit pursued by a bear, which occurs in the play The Winter's Tale. The Winter's Tale is another not very often performed play by Shakespeare and one of his latter plays, but it does have a similarity to Antony and Cleopatra because Antony and Cleopatra is classified as a tragedy. It's the tragedy of Antony and Cleopatra, but it doesn't fit a true tragedy according to the Aristotelian terms. It can also be in some senses classified as a comedy. And you could also, of course, say that it's a history, but it's none of those things. I would classify it as a romance. Okay. And what I mean by romance is that, yes, it does so happen that the two characters are romantically involved, but that's, again, not what a romance is. It is Romanesque, meaning that, number one, the play is based in the historical Roman era, right? Rome dominates the globe, or it dominates the West. And the other is that it espouses the values of classical Rome, including the martial attitude, right? And the emphasis on the will versus reason. It says, let's see, the play begins with Fulvia's death in 40 BC, and it ends with Cleopatra's death on August 29th, 30 BC. So it takes a huge chunk of time, but Shakespeare sort of narrows it down into 12 days. Now, the classical tragedy will occur in the time, really the space of about a day, right? But Shakespeare he writes the rules and he throws out the rules. In Antony and Cleopatra, Shakespeare put behind idyllic love, which he had treated more than a dozen years before in Romeo and Juliet, and turned his attention to the consuming passion of two characters who had already run the gamut of human emotion. So what's interesting is we have sort of an anti-Romeo and Juliet, right? Romeo and Juliet, we have two youths. We got two youths who are in love, but in Antony and Cleopatra, we have two grown adults. And not only that, but these two adults have seen everything. They've, like he says, they've run the gamut of human emotion, and they are fully human beings. They're fully realized. And we're going to come to the question of what is the driving force in the play? This says 6 or 7 years before, Shakespeare had portrayed Antony as the devoted friend of Julius Caesar, the orator at his funeral, and the leader of the victorious faction that put to rout Caesar's assassins. Now we see Antony, an older, if not a wiser man, a leader who could still command the allegiance and loyalty of half the Roman world. This man, exuberant in all his emotions, great of soul, and equally great in his vices, matches his wit, his courage, and his passion with the most cunning siren of the East, Cleopatra. A lesser dramatist of the period might have made this play a struggle between the good and evil angels for the soul of Antony or of universal man. But Shakespeare, in his own maturity, chooses to treat a far subtler theme than the old morality play motifs. With the detail of a clinical psychologist, he studies the impact upon one another or two complex characters, one a Roman and the other an Egyptian. In his hands, Antony and Cleopatra not only are the prototypes of man and woman, but the symbols of the Roman and the Eastern worlds. Antony sums up in himself the good and the bad of Roman life. Cleopatra is the essence of the mystery of the East, an enchantress capable of exerting all the witchery associated in the Elizabethan mind with Egypt. The struggle is rather in Antony's own soul, as the Roman soldier at intervals remembers his duty in the face of the innovations of Eastern luxury and lust. In the end, Antony's passion for Cleopatra completes his ruin, a ruin to which Shakespeare manages to give an air of grandeur. Now remember, there are 4 Shakespearean true tragedies, right? Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, and Othello. This is not one of his true tragedies. But what's interesting is that the play is so good. This is really a great play. I mean, it's really great because in every Shakespearean play is divided by Nicholas Rowe and the later scholars into 5 acts. We think of the arc of a tragedy or the arc of a drama as 3 acts. But it's delineated into 5 acts, and really the action doesn't get going until the 3rd act. So the first 2 acts are they're not exposition, but they're simply, it's the life of Antony and Cleopatra and what happens to them in this era. And where we really start to see where we really get invested into the story is around Act 3 when Mark Antony goes back to Rome. He confronts Augustus and Lepidus, and the triumvirate is reunited. It will be broken again, though. And so one of the interesting things is that this is so different from, like, let's say, even a great movie that's made today, something considered a great movie that would be made today, right? One of the tropes now is that we have, the anti-hero, right? We have just as a sort of what's become now almost an archetypal example of this would be like in film would be like the Dirty Harry character, right? We've got Clint Eastwood, who is he's supposed to be a good guy because he's a cop and all this stuff, right? And yet he kills the bad guys, but he uses sort of bad guy methods to kill the bad guys. So in the mind of the average person watching the film, they think oh, this guy, he's politically incorrect. He's a son of a bitch. He's a jerk. And that's the way that his bosses treat him. But it doesn't matter as long as he gets the job done, right? And that's supposed to paint him as a kind of an anti-hero. Now, that almost seems simplistic when you compare it to something like Antony and Cleopatra, because what Shakespeare manages to do is he paints Antony as, remember, we've covered Antony when we did Suetonius and the 12 Caesars, and we talked about what a jerk Mark Antony is. He's completely Machiavellian. He has all these machinations, and of course the political life and the complexities of Rome sort of they enable that sort of behavior, right? But what we see is a guy who is the foremost soldier in the world. He's described as that, and he is beguiled by Cleopatra. Cleopatra is the most she's an enchantress. He describes her as a witch at times. She is seductive. Of course she emulates the East and Egypt and Ptolemaic Egypt and all of the mystery rites. but she is utterly beautiful and sexy. And we sort of think of her the way that the Elizabethans sort of started to think of her, in this way that was like folklorish, where you get this beautiful woman who is, she seduces Roman emperors and Caesars and, and all these people. And she, it's all about love, but that's not really the case. And in fact, Cleopatra is a lot different from the way, historically, was a lot different from the way that Shakespeare takes liberties with her as a person. I mean, in reality, she was as ruthless as any of them. She killed her own brother, right, so she could remain on the throne. It's not that she didn't care about Egypt and her people. She was willing to do anything to stay in power, right? But at the end of the play, what we see with Cleopatra is that she's willing to throw away Egypt. She's willing to throw away her power for the sake of love. Now, it's interesting because one of the things we also, if you were to Google, Cleopatra, inevitably the pictures of Elizabeth Taylor show up. Elizabeth Taylor from the film Cleopatra, which, has that Guinness Book of World Records thing about the most costume changes in a movie and all that. Right. And we get the great Richard Burton as the Mark Antony character. Right. And it's interesting that sort of life mirrors art, right? Because Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor were this couple who he like Mark Antony, was beguiled by her sort of dark beauty. And they were married. They had a stormy relationship. They got divorced, and then they got remarried, right? Then they got divorced again. So, Mark Antony and Cleopatra are at each other's throats, and they hate each other at times. She even deserts him in the middle of a battle and leaves him to lose the battle, but he runs right back to her, and he loves her. And what sort of ruins her is at the end of the play is that she does this thing that Shakespeare does I've talked before about the thin line between tragedy and comedy in Shakespeare, right? And that thin line essentially occurs where characters will do crazy things, especially for love, including fake their death. This occurs in a number of plays, most notably Romeo and Juliet, obviously, and in Much Ado About Nothing. Now, Much Ado About Nothing is a completely different play from Romeo and Juliet because we have adults. But what happens is essentially that hero fakes her death so that Claudio will come to her funeral monument and weep for her and prove his love, and then she can reveal herself, and then they'll be in love, and then they catch Don John. He's the antagonist, the instigator, the villain, and then they live happily ever after. That's what makes it a comedy, right? It's a happy ending. Antony and Cleopatra is a happy ending in the sense that the two are together, right? And that even posthumously, they are united in death, because one of the things she states is that she's going to kill herself so that she can see Mark Antony in the afterlife. And of course, the final lines of the play belong to Augustus, now Augustus Caesar, who is Octavian, right? Caesar's nephew, who inherits he sort of inherits all the power that was split up with the triumvirate. And becomes that leaves him to become the sole emperor of Rome. And one of his final lines are devoted to the fact that even though Mark Antony was his enemy in this battle of Actium, he and Cleopatra, he tried to get Cleopatra not to kill herself, but she does, and so he thinks that their love is sort of pure, and he orders them to be buried together, right? Yeah, former Ghost says, who else is thrilled about analyzing music from now on? Yes, thank you so much, because I'm looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a good stream. It says, let's see, Shakespeare changed the characterization that he found in Plutarch to make her the epitome of feminine sorcery rather than the wily sovereign bent upon maintaining the power of her dynasty. Cleopatra's character makes her the sum of all passionate women. In the play, her thoughts are all of Antony and of love. Egypt can go to rack and ruin if only she can spend ambrosial days and nights with her lover. This is distinctly not the Cleopatra of history who coolly poisoned one brother to keep him from sharing her throne and spent much of her energy and thought in the effort to outwit Roman conquerors and strengthen her own authority. In Shakespeare's treatment, Cleopatra is first and foremost a woman in love, a realistic woman who recognizes her status in the eyes of other women. She knows she is mistress rather than wife, and voices her spite at those women who occupy more favored positions. Her contempt for the virtuous Octavia is unbounded, and she hates the memory of dead Fulvia. Although Antony and Cleopatra is primarily a drama of action, the portrayal and contrast of character add much to the richness of the play. Octavius is presented as a cold, calculating, and adroit politician at arms, one who only at rare intervals, as the news of Antony's death, allows himself the luxury of a generous thought. Against Cleopatra, we see Octavia, who, if not as icy as her brother, is nevertheless chilly and obviously correct in all her behavior. Even the country yokel who brings the asp to Cleopatra, like many of Shakespeare's rural types, is drawn with accurate detail. I love that, the country yokel. Yeah, it's oftentimes in Shakespeare. See, this is why Shakespeare is credited, as Harold Bloom says, the invention of the human in terms of literature, because Shakespeare really runs the gamut in terms of all the different personalities of people. He's able to accurately and to really adeptly capture characters in a few lines. I mean, that's what verse is, right? The best words in the best order. And it's interesting that with some of these country yokels, with some of these lower characters, he really captures them. I mean, he really brings them to life, which is you compare that to the average film now, where there's just no characterization. It's all exposition. There's very little characterization. And I would say, before I get into the question of Shakespeare's authorship, which I'm gonna address here, I would say that my thesis for this play is essentially that the play is about the love story between two powerful people. But it's important to keep in mind that it is a microcosm of a larger, I guess you could say, a global entity where all of these people, these power players, are doing their little wars for power, but they all work under the same system. And what we see is that we think, especially if you haven't read the play, you go into it thinking that Antony and Cleopatra are the ultimate lovers. They're the ultimate sort of older love couple. But what we see is that that doesn't negate the fact that they want to be together, but they always have an eye to the greater system. And what I mean by that is that Mark Antony is willing to leave the love of his life to go back to Rome, to reconcile, and to marry Octavia, who is Octavian's sister, in order to patch up the triumvirate. He then leaves right away again, and he breaks it up. So this is the complexity of human beings, right? That human beings they do ridiculous and stupid and illogical things and unreasonable things, especially for love, right? And we have that pitted against somebody like Octavian, but even Octavian, who sees that Mark Antony, he does not like that Mark Antony languishes in Egypt, like he says, this ambrosial Egypt, or like Cleopatra says, our salad days, right? The days of our youth, our green days, the days of our budding youth and our happiness, when nothing can get us, and where the meal of life will be on the way, right? Music be the food of love, play on. However, even Cleopatra, we see, while she beguiles Mark Antony, right, she has her own machinations for power. My vindication of that within the play is the fact that she deserts him in battle. She's awful to him. She says terrible things. She says, go. And then she turns around and then she says, why did you leave? I love you. Why can't you come back? And so I would say that the play is emblematic of the power structure of not only ancient Rome, or Rome with its, a colony of Egypt, but this establishes the Pax Romana, which is inherited by the Pax Britannica, the British Empire, and the exact same power pursuits and sort of inner machinations and circles within circles that we see in this occur now, right? It's the same exact thing. And that, these two characters also can be seen in everyday human beings, where we all have our own, you have your own power. If you work in an office, there's power structure, power struggles and machinations that people make in an office, I'm sure. But it's the same. It's sort of the same exact thing. The movie with Liz and Dick was on TCM recently. No way, really. That's pretty cool. Synchro, you guys, right? Yeah, another great. Just to speak of film, it's hard to get a character like Cleopatra on film. And my own thesis will sort of discuss this when we talk about the lines in the book and the text. And scholars will, other scholars will sort of agree with this, I assume, or we'll see. But it's difficult to get Cleopatra because she is utterly enigmatic. She's one thing, and then she's completely the opposite. Now, that is what I was discussing at the very beginning of the play with the gap in nature. There's a physical gap in nature between Rome and Egypt, right? We've got the European continent and the African continent. We've got the Mediterranean. We've got a large swath of land, right? We've got the man and the woman, right? We've got the two sides. We've got the gap in nature between war and love, war and peace. But we also see that one of the continuous themes that's brought up by Shakespeare in his language is the idea of liquidity and overflowing. So even when Mark Antony feels like he is full to the brim with love, the full to the brim indicates that he's full to the brim of liquid. There's a number of references to the Nile, obviously, right? Cleopatra makes continuous references to serpents, which is not only foreshadowing, but is sort of speaks to the nature of her as a person and to the Egyptians, or at least what the Romans saw about the Egyptians, right? That there's even a scene where Pompey, Sextus Pompeius, or Pompey's son, who, remember, Pompey is the one who fought against Caesar in the first triumvirate, right? And then we have the second triumvirate after that. But Pompey was defeated by Caesar, actually defeated specifically by Agrippa, who's a major character in this play. Agrippa is like one of my favorite characters in one of my favorite historical Roman figures. Agrippa is just like sort of transcends all these other people and these like petty characters. He's like such a magnificent man. He's like fascinating. If you don't know anything about Agrippa, Marcus Agrippa, if you've ever been to Rome and seen the Pantheon, Agrippa has his name, right on the front of the Pantheon. Agrippa is the guy. He was, he never became emperor, obviously. He never, but he was, and he died. He was about 50 or 51. He was Augustus's or Octavian's best friend. He was his closest confidant and advisor. He was a military hero. He basically won the Battle of Actium. He was an admiral there. He helped defeat the forces of Pompey, and also he's the one who made Rome into marble. He marbleized Rome, right? Did all of these great works. He built all of the aqueducts. And Agrippa also gave us, if you didn't know this, Agrippa gave us the Roman foot. He established the measurement of the Roman foot. And also he was the grandfather of Caligula, and he was the great grandfather of Nero. Now, the sins of the father, right? So that, yes, they were scumbags. But Agrippa was a great man. Okay. He didn't have anything to, he died, and then they were, perverted by whatever they were perverted by, which we've covered, by the way, in the 12 Caesars. But, Jason, where was I? Let's see. Let's talk about the question of Shakespeare's authorship here, because people have asked about this quite a bit. So I might as well dive into it here. Let's see. This says, one of the things is that Shakespeare's lines have matured in a sense, because remember, this is 1608. Shakespeare lived 1564 to 1616. This is like 5 years away from his final works. he wrote a number of works every year. And I'm going to discuss briefly the question of his authorship in terms of his contemporaries and sort of try to refute some of the common criticisms about or theories about why Shakespeare couldn't have been Shakespeare, if that makes sense. Because I know people are interested in this, and that's fine to be interested. So we might as well look at it objectively and see what this guy has to say. You know where I stand on this, but let's look at it. This says, let's see. This says, as early as 1598, Shakespeare was so well known as a literary and dramatic craftsman that Francis Maries, in his Palladis Timea with Wit's Treasury, referred in flattering terms to him as mellifluous and honey-tongued Shakespeare, famous for his Venus and Adonis, his Lucrece, and his sugared sonnets, the Roip of Lucrece, and which were circulating among his private friends. Mears observes further that as Plautus and Seneca are accounted the best for comedy and tragedy among the Latins, so Shakespeare among the English is the most excellent in both kinds for the stage. And he mentions a dozen plays that made a name for Shakespeare. He concludes with the remark that the muses would speak with Shakespeare's fine filed phrase if they would speak English. To those acquainted with the history of the Elizabethan and Jacobean periods, it is incredible that anyone should be so naive or ignorant as to doubt the reality of Shakespeare as the author of the plays that bear his name. This is what he's saying. Yet so much nonsense has been written about other candidates for the plays that it is well to remind readers that no credible evidence that would stand up in a court of law has ever been adduced to prove either that Shakespeare did not write his plays or that anyone else wrote them. Okay, here we go with Francis Bacon. Says, all the theories offered for the authorship of Francis Bacon, the Earl of Derby, the Earl of Oxford, the Earl of Hertford, Christopher Marlowe, and a score of other candidates are mere conjectures spun from the active imagination of persons who confuse hypothesis and conjecture with evidence. This is what he says. I don't like his language here, how he was saying. I don't like it when people are trying to refute evidence and they refer to it as nonsense in terms of like a literary argument. So, because we got to hear the argument, right? However, you know where I stand. It says, as Mears' statement in 1596 indicates, Shakespeare was already a popular playwright whose name carried weight at the box office. Now, he did only give one example, okay? But I'm going to give a couple more examples. The obvious reputation of Shakespeare as early as 1598 makes the effort to prove him a myth absurd. The anti-Shakespeareans talk darkly about a plot of vested interest to maintain the authorship of Shakespeare. Nobody has any vested interest in Shakespeare, but every scholar is interested in the truth and in the quality of evidence advanced by special pleaders who set forth hypotheses in place of facts. The anti-Shakespeareans base their arguments upon a few simple premises, all of them false. Okay, so let's look at the arguments. These false premises are that Shakespeare was an unlettered yokel without any schooling, that nothing is known about Shakespeare, and that only a noble lord or the equivalent in background could have written the plays. The facts are that more is known about Shakespeare than about most dramatists of his day, and that he had a very good education acquired at the Stratford Grammar School, that the plays show no evidence of profound book learning, and that the knowledge of kings and courts evident in the plays is no greater than any intelligent young man could have picked up at second hand. Okay, I agree with that. Most anti-Shakespeareans are naive and betray an obvious snobbery. So what he's saying here is in a sense, is that we know that one, that Christopher Marlowe didn't write the plays because Christopher Marlowe died, right? He was assassinated. We know that Francis Bacon and some of these other guys didn't write the plays because there are two things. Okay, one is that people, I think, are advancing an argument which actually will prove the opposite of what they intend. What I mean is that they've sort of inherited this argument from scholars. It's obviously a scholarly argument that nobody like Shakespeare could have written the lines that he did or the plays that he did because they would have had to have been educated. They would have to be Oxford or Cambridge educated, right? And so what that means is that only the academic elites are capable of writing plays like this. Now, let's go into that as a tangent for just a second. We're talking about creative writing, right? We're not talking about analytical writing. So in a way, and I don't mean this to sound trite, but like that discounts the theory because we're exactly, Thomas, intellectual snobbery. You're saying that only these people can create these things. Okay. But look at the world we live in now. Now, only the people that are connected with the elites in some way are able to make it big the way that they do, are able to be published the way that they do now. But that's not to say that they can't create the things that they do. Does that make sense? A lot of times, I mean, it's like in Thomas Gray's poem. It's like the paths of glory lead but to the grave. Think how many unknown geniuses live in the world. Now that sounds like a pretty tangential argument, right? Yes, Chris, tangent time. The other is to say that a lot of the people that are advancing these arguments are anti-academic, right? Which is ironic because they are advancing an academic argument. Does that make sense, you guys? Also, I like his argument that to say that, oh, well, we only know we only know so much about Shakespeare, right? But we know about some of these other guys right here. Well, the fact is that we don't know much about Francis Bacon. We don't know much about the Earl of Oxford. We don't know much about Christopher Marlowe. In fact, we know more about Shakespeare than we do about those characters. Uh-oh. I don't know why I froze right there. I shouldn't be freezing. I should be good, you guys. Am I good? Yeah, internet should be solid, right? The other thing is that, and this is sort of a personal opinion, personal interpretation of this, is that no matter how much you are schooled, and I'm saying this from a person who's, I went pretty high up in education. Okay. I've been in school my entire life. Okay. So what I'm saying is that there is no substitute for creativity and genius and your own voice in writing. Nobody can teach you these. They can teach you how to be better. They can teach you how to cultivate your talent, but you can have look at Harold Bloom, for example. Right? Harold Bloom, as we've discussed before many times in this stream, is the authority on, in my opinion, the authority on Shakespeare, the authority on all things literary, especially American. Okay, he is the monumental critic. But Harold Bloom can't write poems. He can't write plays. He can't do any of that shit. All he can do is analyze. That's analytical writing, and that's great. That's a completely different side. But he is not able to create, and he knew that. He's, RIP. He knew that though, right? And so it doesn't matter what if you were Cambridge or Oxford educated, that's no substitute for the inherent genius or the God-given genius or the God-given talent of a Shakespeare. Does that make sense, you guys? I hope that makes sense. That didn't sound like a very cogent argument, so forgive me. But let's see. This says William Shakespeare was the son of John Shakespeare of Stratford upon Avon, a substantial citizen of that small but busy market town in the center of the rich agricultural county of Warwick. Shakespeare kept a shop we would call a general store. He dealt in wool and other produce and gradually acquired property. As a youth, he learned the trade of a glover and leather maker. There's no contemporary evidence that the elder Shakespeare was a butcher, and which it sort of refutes the idea of which some people at one time as a fad called Shakespeare the butcher's boy of Stratford, which is fine. Who gives a shit, right? Let's see. Stratford records give considerable information about John Shakespeare and about William Shakespeare, especially because of their business dealings. Now, a lot of the reasons that we know, one of the major reasons we know about Shakespeare and his business dealings is because I'm gonna kind of gloss over some of this here and just give you a top of the head recount of it. Is that, remember that Shakespeare not only was not acquainted, like as in friends with King James, right? But he was known to King James in the sense that he wrote Macbeth, right? He was patronized by Macbeth by King James to write Macbeth. He may have performed plays in front of Queen Elizabeth. I don't know if he did or not. But he was a playwright of note. He was a member of Lord Chamberlain's Men, which was an actual business, a group of people and playwrights. He became, after King James ascended to the throne, the company changed the title to the King's Men, wherein Shakespeare was a shareholder. He was written about by other contemporary playwrights, most notably Ben Jonson. And of course, there's the thing about the guy calling him the upstart crow and all that stuff. But it's like, no, but he was still writing about Shakespeare. He still mentions Shakespeare. One of the other arguments, you guys, is that, oh, well, we don't have any contemporary evidence, from the time that Shakespeare wrote the plays because of his handwriting, right? We also, this moron spelled his name, 37 different ways or whatever. Okay, but consider that now, do you seek out teleplays and screenplays? Do you guys read those? When you were in school, did you read those? You may have read a screenplay. I've got a copy of Apocalypse Now in the other room by John Milius, but like that was a big deal when I got it because I don't own many copies of screenplays. You certainly don't read screenplays in school, and most people don't read script. I mean, it's not something that's often published. They are published now and they can be published, but think of a play in the contemporary era. The plays specifically were meant to be performed. They were meant to be performed, constantly edited. And the reason that we have different spellings of Shakespeare's own name is mainly because the first folio was published in 1623 after Shakespeare's death. It was typeset then. And all of the plays that were published before that in any way were constantly being edited, not just by Shakespeare, but he worked in a theater. They were constantly edited by shareholders, by producers, by actors. So it's not unusual that we don't have any examples of Shakespeare's own handwriting. So whenever people say that, like, oh, look at his handwriting, I don't think there's a single example of a play in Shakespeare's actual physical hand that's been published. It just doesn't exist. And why would it? It's from 500 years ago. But they were compiled in 1623 in the first folio. I do have a problem with, the argument about why do people have a vested interest in maintaining Shakespeare as this guy? I don't like the guy's sort of reputation of that, because we can apply that to other things in the world we live in now, right? Because that's one of the things we always see. Why would anybody want to lie about putting a man on the MOON, right? Well, there are a number of different reasons, and they're not easily classifiable and put down into one particular, it's like false dialectic. It's not this or that. There are a number of different reasons, which we've seen, right, for any of these various things that occur on a geopolitical stage. So I think the same goes for, who knows what the interest would be if that were the case. Now, I don't believe that's the case. I do think that Shakespeare was the guy who wrote it. But who knows? There could be a vested interest in that. I don't know that. It says, let's see. Yeah, in 1594, right? 1594, Shakespeare was a member of the company of actors known as Lord Chamberlain's Men. After the accession of James I in 1603, the company would have the sovereign of their patron and would be known as the King's Men. During the period of its greatest prosperity, this company would have had its principal theaters, the Globe and the Blackfriars. Shakespeare was both an actor and a shareholder in the company. It's in documents. Tradition was assigned to him such acting roles as Adam and As You Like It, and the Ghost in Hamlet, the Ghost in Julius Caesar, etc. A modest place on the stage that suggests he may have had other duties in the management of the company. Such conclusions, however, are based on surmise. We do know that his plays were popular and that he was highly successful in his vocation. His first play may have been The Comedy of Errors, acted perhaps in 1591. Certainly, this was one of his earliest plays. The three parts of Henry VI were acted sometime between 1590 and 1592. What I was saying earlier about voice also is that writers have a voice, right? One of the things you develop as a writer is this thing called a voice, where it's kind of like when like when somebody, for instance, gets in your chat, if it's that person or not, because you know their language, how they speak, their cadence, their syntax, right? That's a very brief, that's a blurb, right? But with with writers, with Shakespeare, who has tens of thousands of lines of verse, right? We see that. We see the voice. You can read any Shakespearean play and know that it's Shakespeare. You know that Shakespeare is different from Christopher Marlowe. You can read The Two Noble Kinsmen and see where the dichotomy between where Shakespeare contributed and where the other guy contributed. Marlowe's voice is completely different from Shakespeare's. And that's even from 500 years ago. right? It's very difficult to fake that. Now that can be faked, of course, right? Of course that can be faked. I mean, you see it like on Twitter when people have, accounts, right? And it's obviously a fake account. You see that. People can mimic stuff all the time. But in terms of Shakespeare, it's very difficult. And I would say that like a list of people compiling lines of verse and shit, I mean, that's almost mathematical. That's almost like Spurg AI. That's not the voice of a man writing something that cuts to the core of human beings. All right, so this has been a long tangent, you guys. I'm sorry about that. But I thought that I would address that. Maybe that helped. Maybe you found that if you had a question about that, maybe you found that useful. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you can refute all of that. I don't know. I'm not, I'm not debating. I can't debate. I'm just trying to analyze literature and give you my opinion based on the text. Right? Does that make sense, y'all? Let's see. Let's go ahead and discuss. Let's go into the actual text of the play here. And I'm going to talk about form plus content equals meaning. And that may sound boring, but what I'm going to talk about is essentially this occurs in all art, right? The way, especially in literature, I've discussed this many times. What Shakespeare's plays are meant to be performed, but the difference is that literature or poetry or verse, right, is meant to be experienced in two ways. It's meant to be seen on the page. The way that the text appears on the page is important. The way that the words are arranged is important, but also the way that it sounds. The two things they work together. They're symbiotic. One is not like exclusive. You can't just do one or the other. This is what separates, for example, this is why I think that, Bob Dylan's Nobel Prize for Literature is such bullshit. I'm not like knocking Bob Dylan, but what I'm saying is that, Bob Dylan, okay, is a songwriter. And yes, songs, which I'm going to get into in the other stream, songs and song lyrics essentially stem from the poetic tradition because lyric, right, comes from the word lyre, L-Y-R-E, the lyre, right? The ancient poets would play the lyre and they would play a tune while they sang their verses. That's where we get song lyrics. But the difference is that Bob Dylan's songs work in an auditory sense. They are songs. They're if you like Bob Dylan, like the songs make sense to you because they strike you or they are meaningful to you in how you hear them. But when you read them on the page, they're well, I was going to say they're shit, but they're not. But they don't work on the page. Okay, it's the same with the Beatles. It's the same with a lot of Jim Morrison. I mean, these are songwriters, and that's fine. I'm not knocking them as songwriters. I'm saying they're not poets. They are poetic, right? You could say like, oh, Bob Dylan was the boomer poet, right? But he's not. That's like an honorary term. He's not actually a poet, and that's why obviously the Nobel Prize for Literature is a globalist operation. It is what it is, and they give it to the guy because he'd been nominated so many times and all this stuff. But that's different from Shakespeare, where the way that the words interact on the page, and you have meaning within meaning within meaning, and you have quadruple levels of pun mixed with the way that it hits the ear, is what creates meaning. It's what creates meaning in literature. Let's discuss the very first lines of the play. Okay, it begins, "Nay, but this dotage of our generals overflows the measure. Those his goodly eyes that o'er the files and musters of the war have glowed like plated Mars, now bend, now turn the office and devotion of their view. Upon a tawny front, his captain's heart, which in the scuffles of great flights hath burst the buckles on his breast, reneges all temper, and it becomes the bellows and the fan to cool a gypsy's lust. Look where they come. Take but good note, and you shall see in him the triple pillar of the world transformed into a strumpet's fool. Behold and see." So let's talk about microcosm, macrocosm. The microcosm is that the beginning of the play begins with the word nay. It begins with a negative word, right? It's important that the play begins with a negative word. We know that there will be tragedy. We know that something will be negated. We know that the love between Antony and Cleopatra will be negated. And we know that Antony himself and his duty will be negated, even within himself, right? This brief speech ends with the word see. Behold and see. It's just a brief line in Shakespeare. Remember, the real estate's important. Behold and see. And that's because sensory knowledge is important in this, because that is why Antony and Cleopatra, they go on long passages about how they love what they can see. Their love is temporary. And the Romans will even criticize Antony for being a slave to the passions. He has no sense of reason. The macrocosm is that the last line of the play is solemnity. Nay, solemnity. It begins with nay, negative, no, and it ends with solemnity, right? Which is to say that begins negative, ends negative. All the events therein are contained in this passion of Antony, where the whole time basically Octavian is saying, what are you doing, man? You're this great guy. You're part of this triple pillar, as it says here, right? The triumvirate. And you're off with Cleopatra doing all this crazy stuff, and you don't have to be. But in a sense, it's like if he didn't do all that stuff, then there would be no war, yes, right? And all of the regular people wouldn't suffer. But at the same time, Augustus himself, Octavian, wouldn't have gone on to be the emperor. Also, when it says things like have glowed like plated Mars, Antony is continuously compared to Mars, because Mars and Venus, Cleopatra is Venus, right? And we have like the two halves of their sort of weird whole. We also have, and it becomes the bellows and the fan. The bellows are like the bowels of the ship, right? And the thing that gives the wind to the stomach, yes? And it blows the ships of Actium. It's also related to Bella and to war. Bellum, war. Notice that at the very beginning, they call him a strumpet's fool. Cleopatra is described as a strumpet. It says, let's see, Cleopatra comes in right away. By the way, a word on Cleopatra. One of the things that I'm surprised by in this play is that when classical actors, or when people, or when readers, when anyone in the public sphere and public consciousness thinks of Cleopatra, they tend to think of let's say female characters in drama, right? Actresses especially, all actors, I've said this before, all actors have two sort of dream roles. One is Hamlet, obviously, and the other is Iago, because Iago is the arch villain. And Iago's interesting because he has no motivation for being a villain other than being a villain, right? So it's sort of like these two like different sides of the spectrum for an actor. Actresses will always want to play Lady Macbeth, right? Or Ophelia. They always, actresses, usually, and I'm not saying always, but many actresses want to read or want to play Ophelia because she's this emotional character, she kills herself, all this stuff. But Cleopatra is almost forgotten in a sense. And Cleopatra is probably, I'm just going to say, Cleopatra is probably the most magnificent of literary female characters, especially Shakespearean characters. I mean, she's so complex. She's so well written. Shakespeare can write for women. Tennessee Williams could write female parts, right? Shakespeare can write female parts. He gets Cleopatra. She is so complex, and she has all these sides of what it means to be a woman, but especially a woman in power. And she dominates this play. I mean, she's in it longer than Antony. She outlives Antony. And she has these long speeches. She has way more page time or stage time or screen time than Ophelia does, and certainly more than Lady Macbeth does. I mean, Lady Macbeth is very brief, right? Go back to my Macbeth stream. Cleopatra comes in at the very beginning, and she says, "Nay, hear them, Antony. Fulvia perchance is angry, or who knows if the scarce bearded Caesar have not sent his powerful mandate to you. Do this or this." Great sentence. See, Shakespeare's great at, unity and variety, right? He will have long soliloquies, and then he will give us variety where we stay interested and where we understand the complexity of human beings by interspersing them with short sentences, almost sentence fragments. Do this or this, take in that kingdom and enfranchise that, perform it, or else we damn thee. Antony says, how, my love? She says, perchance, nay, and most like, you must stay here longer. Your dismission is come from Caesar, Octavian. Therefore, hear it, Antony. Where's Fulvia's process? Caesar's, I would say. Both? Call in the messengers. As I am Egypt's queen, thou blushest, Antony, and that blood of thine is Caesar's homager. Else so thy cheek pays shame when shrill-tongued Fulvia scolds. Fulvia is Mark Antony's wife, who is still alive and who is going to die soon and is back in Rome. And basically what she's saying is Caesar has sent and said, you got to get your ass back here and talk to your wife. And she's like, no, don't leave. But you have to leave because it's your duty. You're only a man if you do your duty. But also, if you leave, I'm going to be pissed. Right? Antony says, famously, let Rome and Tiber melt and the wide arch of the ranged empire fall. Here is my space. Kingdoms are clay. Our dungy earth alike feeds beast as man. The nobleness of life is to do thus. When such a mutual pair, he embraces her. Such a mutual pair and such a twain can do it. In which I bind on pain of punishment. The world to we stand up peerless. She says, excellent falsehood. Why did you marry Fulvia and not love her? I'll seem the fool I am not. Antony will be himself. He says, there's not a minute of our lives should stretch without some pleasure now. In other words, I'm a grown-ass man, and I've conquered the world, and I can do what I want, and screw Octavian, right? He's beardless. He's this, he's this little punk back in Rome, right? Cheers, Kristen. Thank you, homegirl. I appreciate you. And yeah, I forgot that it's after 8, so Cook's easy going live. I'm going to keep going for a few more minutes here, you guys. And thank you. And remember, please, of course, obligatory, and especially, you guys, where's the money, Lebowski? Where's the money, shithead? Sorry, I woke up the dog doing that. Obviously, you're not a golfer. So look, sorry. So look, you guys, yeah, if you're watching this later, please make sure that if you would, I would appreciate it if you would smash that like, leave a comment in the description after the video's over. And please see my links there that my homeboys and homegirls are dropping in the chat and in the video description and in the channel. If you're on the channel description, what that means, if you don't know this, is you go to my page on YouTube and you scroll all the way to the right where it says About. And then under About, it's got PayPal and Cash App links. And please think about supporting me, you guys, because it's tough out there. It's hard out there for a pimp, as they say, right? And I certainly would really, really appreciate it. Oh, look at this. Oh, shouts out to Kim. Shouts out to Kim drops $25. And I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Shouts out to, let's see. Shouts out $10 from our homeboy, Thomas Henderson. Appreciate you, Thomas Henderson. Thank you so much for supporting me on PayPal, you guys. Yes, and thank you, Jeff, for dropping those links. You guys, I'm going to say, oh, it's hard work. Yeah, of course it's hard work, but I love doing this. I love being here with you guys, and we got some good stuff coming up this week, and please help me to keep going. Like I've said many times, you guys, I got to get books. I got to get more books. I'm running out of books. I got a million books here, but I'm looking for more books and more book ideas, right? I'm trying to upgrade. I just upgraded. Internet's good. Got the light. I'm trying to upgrade this equipment, you guys, and get us going to the big leagues, at least so I can make it better for you. So thank you so much. And I would really, really appreciate it. I got holes in my shoes and I'm eating SpaghettiOs. Okay. So please support your boy here. All right. Let's see. One of the things that comes out of this particular passage that I just read is one of the main themes is that this split difference where the characters are never whole and they constantly contradict themselves. For example, let me read you. let me find one passage in here. It says, let's see. Nay, but this dotage of our generals. This is from Act 1, Scene 1. Let's see. Act 1, Scene 1. Yes. Nay, but this dotage of our generals overflows the measure, right? Everything's always overflowing. Let's see. Another example would be form and content. Let's see. This is Act 1, Scene 2. The end of Act 1, Scene 2. It says, Sextus Pompeius hath given the dare to Caesar and commanded the empire of the sea, our slippery people, whose love is never linked to the deserver. Okay, so what he does here is Shakespeare will often do a clever thing where subconsciously, okay, on the surface, okay, this is literal and figurative meaning. On the surface, we are hearing about how things are broken or about how things are apart. But what unifies them is the sounds of the words, often like with alliteration or with a sibilant S sound, right? The empire of the sea, our slippery people. The deserver, the deserts are past, right? They begin to throw Pompey the Great and all his dignities upon his son. The serpent's poison, say our pleasure to such whose places under us require our quick remove from hence. In other words, there's unity and variety, right? And we get this weird unification of opposites in the play, which is supposed to be emblematic of the two opposites of Rome and Egypt, or man and woman, right? At the beginning of Act 1, Scene 3, we have form plus content equals meaning in the broken lines. So what happens is, again, Shakespeare doesn't usually do stage directions. He will indicate those by the way that the characters speak quickly. Remember, every line in, the usual line, the status quo is iambic pentameter. So when you have a line that is broken up into it's multisyllabic, or it's broken up into fragments, what it indicates is he's saying this character speaks, the next character speaks, next character. They speak one on top of the other. It indicates haste. And he doesn't ever need to tell us the characters speak quickly. So for instance, Cleopatra and Charmian are saying, where is he? I do not see him since. See where he is. Who's with him? What he does? I did not send you. If you find him sad, say I'm dancing. If in mirth, report that I'm sudden sick. Even right there, again, if you see him and he thinks that I'm sad, say that I'm in mirth. If he thinks that I'm happy, say that I'm sick. Right? We have these opposites. It's like they're always trying to make up for one another and account for one another. Right? It creates this gap in nature that I discussed. Let's see. Famous description of Cleopatra. I'm just going to go through a couple of Proudfoot signature moccasins. Sounds like a cash cow, Crispy. Yes. Yeah, give me some moccasins, y'all. Kristen says, what did Kristen say? Stylish boots, smaller, $300. Okay. Let's see. This says Act 2, Scene 2. Enobarbus, who is Antony's loyal compatriot and actually ends up selling him out at the end of the play. He will get a bunch of money from Octavian, and then will go over to Octavian's side, and he will Judas betray Antony. Then he will be so torn up about it that he will kill himself, and he says he will throw himself into a ditch. Again, a gap in nature, right? It says, I will tell you, it's a famous description of Cleopatra. I will tell you, the barge she sat in, like a burnished throne, burned on the water, purple sails, and so perfumed that the winds were lovesick with them. The oars were silver, which to the tune of flutes kept stroke and made the water which they beat to follow faster, as amorous of their strokes. For her own person it beggared all description. She did lie in her pavilion, cloth of gold, of tissue, or picturing that Venus where we see the fancy outworked nature. On each side her stood pretty dimpled boys like smiling cupids with diverse colored fans, whose wind did seem to glow the delicate cheeks which they did cool. And what they undid, did. Again, Opposites. What they undid, did. It's like in Macbeth, and what is, but what is not. Agrippa says, oh, rare for Antony. He says, her gentlewomen, like the Nereides, so many mermaids, tended her in the eyes and made their bends adornings at the helm, a seeming mermaid steers. The silken tackle swell with the touches of those flower soft hands that yearly frame the office. From the barge, a strange invisible perfume hits the sense of the adjacent wharfs. The city cast her people out upon her, and Antony, enthroned in the marketplace, did sit alone, whistling to the air, which but for vacancy had gone to gaze on Cleopatra too, and made a gap in nature. A gap in nature, right? The vacancy. In other words, what he lacked, he found in Cleopatra. All of his martial status, all of his life as a soldier, right? He was lacking the passionate, he was lacking the love of eros. He was lacking erotic love, right? And this will sort of overtake and overpower his senses, which again creates a gap or a distance between himself and the guys back in Rome, the guys back east, right? Oh, what are they doing back east? What movie is that where they always talk about back east? Casino, right? It was in Casino. You insult them a little bit. Yeah, insult them a little bit. That's good, fellas. Insulted him a little bit. Yeah. I'm going to go get the papers. Get the papers. Let's see. So that's the famous description of Cleopatra. Let's see. They talk about Caesar's assassination. What happens is, again, Mowgli, that Antony goes back. He has to marry Octavia, who is Octavian's sister, so that they can reunite the triumvirate. But then he steals away and he goes back to Cleopatra. Then he's declared war. He's declared war on by Octavian and Lepidus. Octavian then turns on Lepidus and says, why don't you like me? Why are you always going for this other guy, right? Because Lepidus is sort of in the middle. Remember in Julius Caesar, Lepidus is sort of seen as this doddering Bo Jiden sort of character. He doesn't know where he is. He's extremely wealthy, and he's one of the members of the triumvirate, but he's sort of turned on by Octavian. And then Octavian and Agrippa go after Antony themselves, and we get the Battle of Actium. Antony wins the first battle, but then he is betrayed by Cleopatra in the naval battle when her barges turn the other way and run. And then what ends up happening in the play is Antony, his sense of duty and his sense of loss of Rome overpower him. And Cleopatra sends word to Antony that through a servant that she's dead. She's committed suicide, and she was lying in her monument, in her pharaoh's monument. Antony then, instead of what they do in Romeo and Juliet and Much Ado About Nothing, instead of going and weeping at her monument, he decides to kill himself for Rome, essentially. But he does not succeed. He tries to get one of his servants to stab him, like in Julius Caesar. The servant ends up killing himself instead. He won't kill his master, this great man, Mark Antony. Then Mark Antony, he basically falls on his sword, but he doesn't die. And then they come and they tell him, no, Cleopatra's not dead. She was just fooling, bro. She's just fooling. I was just fooling about. And he says, fucking bitch. And then he says, take me to her. So then they carry him on a bier up to Cleopatra. And then he instantly, he falls in love with her again. That she's the love of his life. He dies. Then Cleopatra threatens to kill herself. She doesn't. She's stopped by Octavian, who arrives, and she bows to Octavian, who's now the conqueror of Egypt. And Octavian, instead of killing her, says, rise up. You don't listen, Egypt, because he calls her Egypt. You don't need to bow to me, right? But she knows that he's going to, the rest of her life will be sort of lived in misery. One, she won't have Mark Antony by her side. And also she's lost her whole kingdom, essentially. And then she calls for a guy to come in. He brings a basket, and she gets they call it an aspic, but it's actually an asp, which is essentially a Nile serpent, bites her on the breast, and she perishes. And then Octavian weeps for for Mark Antony, for this great man that he says, against these opposites, even though they were at war with one another, he calls him his former brother. They were brothers, essentially, right? Because remember, Mark Antony was the protege of Caesar. He was also the protege, and Octavian is the literal protege. Yes, Jeff. But Mark Antony was essentially the protege, the political protege of Caesar, right? And then he weeps for him, he weeps for Cleopatra, and he buries them together. A couple of other they describe the Egyptian bacchanal. A couple of other famous lines here. This is a perfect summary of Antony's actions. This occurs in Act 3, scene 13. There are a lot of scenes in this, you guys. Remember, you can have only 5 acts in Shakespeare, but you can have as many scenes as you want. And this says, Barba says, Antony only that would make his will lord of his reason. What though you fled from the great face of war, whose several ranges frighted each other? Why should he follow? The itch of his affection should not then have nicked his captainship at such a point when half to half the world opposed, he being the mirrored question. In other words, the world is at war with itself. There's a civil war essentially within Rome again, which is resolved. All of these wars are resolved in Augustus, right? Or Octavian, who will unite this, sort of Roman mess into one empire. But Mark Antony is the cause of this. And it says that he's the cause because he let his will be override his reason. 'Twas a shame no less than was his loss to course your flying flags and leave his navy gazing. He's talking about to Cleopatra because she left him there in the lurch. Antony has a bunch of angry speeches, which, let's see. He says, this is Act 3, scene 13. He says, let's see. When my good stars that were my former guides have empty left their orbs and shot their fires into the abysm of hell. And there's a lot of self-referential work in this to Julius Caesar. This is a reference to the fault, dear Brutus, is not in ourselves, but in the stars, but in ourselves. If he mislike my speech and what is done, tell him he has Hipparchus, my enfranchised bondsman, whom he may at pleasure whip or hang or torture, and he shall like to quit me. Urge it thou hence with thy stripes, because for whipping, be good, be gone. Cleopatra says, dear, if I be so, for my cold heart, let heaven engender hail and poison it in the source, as the first stone drop in my neck, as it determines so dissolve my life. The next Caesarian smites, Caesarian, right, the son of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, who died young, right, could have been the great man of the empire, the son of these two people, but dies young. Till by degrees the memory of my womb, together with my brave Egyptians all, by the discandying of this pelleted storm, lie graveless, till the flies and the gnats of Nile have buried them for prey. Remember, it's interesting to consider that Cleopatra is not just the seducer of Mark Antony, she's also the seducer of Julius Caesar, right? She has this power over these great men. Right, Julius Caesar, who leaves, he goes off with Cleopatra, and they have the son, Caesarion. And then Mark Antony, his protege, does the same. Right? Page 92, Mark Antony is pissed. He's mad as hell at Cleopatra, and he says, I'm going to go off and I'm going to fight this war. Because his martial instincts, right, his duty to Rome is overpowering now. Now his reason, in a sense, is overpowering his will. But again, he loses his sense of reason in his passion for war, just like he did in love. He says, our severed navy, too, have knit again in fleet, threatening most sea-like. Why hast thou been, my heart? Dost thou hear, lady? If from the field I shall return once more to kiss these lips, I will appear in blood. I and my sword will earn our chronicle. It's pretty fucking badass, right? Excuse my language. From when mine hours were nice and lucky, men did ransom lives of me for jests. But now I'll set my teeth and send to darkness all that stopped me. Come, let's have one other gaudy night. Call to me, all my sad captains, fill our bowls once more. Let's mock the midnight bell. This is like just like there's a lot of Macbeth in this. This is just like Macbeth, right? When he says, "Come, come." What does he say? Come night. What does he say? Come night. I can't remember what he says. And then it says, let's see. This is basically in Macbeth at the end of Macbeth when he says, "Let fly hence the English epicures," right? The messenger comes in and tells him, "Oh, I see the guys. Burnham Wood has come to Dunsinane," and he's basically says, "I'll hang thee." And all of his people have deserted him, and they're all fighting for Macduff now and Malcolm. And he says, "It doesn't matter. I bear a charmed life, right? Which must not yield to one of woman born." And he's going to fight by himself. He's going to fight the entire other force by himself. And Macbeth does that. Mark Antony sort of tries to do that, but he can't because of the overwhelming force of Rome, and because he also still, in a way, holds an allegiance to Rome. So again, it's this weird split, this weird dichotomy between love and duty, and those two don't have to be exclusive, right? But it's the sense that the gap in nature means that one has to cross this abyssum, as he calls it earlier, right, in order to get to the other side, and there's no reconciling them. And then ironically, it's reconciled at the end of the play. The death oration, Cleopatra's death oration on Mark Antony, says, she says, "The crown of the earth," she hears that Mark Antony is dead, and she says, "The crown of the earth doth melt, my lord. Oh, withered is the garland of war. The soldier's pole is fallen. Young boys and girls are leveled now with men," right? Leveled now because they're dead, right? And because they've lost themselves to war. Even the young people are in the war. The odds is gone, and there is nothing left remarkable beneath the visiting moon. It's interesting. She always has a lot of lunar imagery because of Isis, because of the worship of Isis and the mystery cults. Later on in the same scene, this is Act 4. She says, Act 4, Scene 4, she says, "No more, but even a woman and commanded by such poor passion as the maid that milks as does meanest chairs. It were for me to throw my scepter at the injurious gods, to tell them that this world did equal theirs till they had stolen our jewel." Her jewel, right? Her jewel was Mark Antony. "All's but naught." That's what I meant about the long and the short sentences, right? A short, simple, active voice, clear sentence. "All's but naught. Patience is sottish, and impatience does become a dog that's mad. Then is it sin to rush into the secret house of death ere death dare come to us. How do you, women? What, good cheer? Why, how now, Charmian, my noble girls? Ah, women, look. Our lamp is spent, it's out. Good sirs, take heart, we'll bury him. And then what's brave, what's noble, let's do it after the high Roman fashion and make death proud to take us. Come away. This case of that huge spirit now is cold. Ah, women, come. We have no friend but resolution and the briefest end." And they exeunt, bearing off Antony's body. She say, and it's interesting. She says she's going to kill herself in the Roman fashion, right? Again, we have these opposites. Later on, Agrippa comments on the fact that that Mark Antony is dead, and he says, and strange it is that nature must compel us to lament our most persisted deeds. In other words, Agrippa is, confounded because they are at war with this guy that was their brother that they liked. He was on their side that they loved, but duty compels them. They have to defeat him. He has to die, right? And yet they lament the fact that he dies, and they're going to honor him in the way that he dies. Does that make sense? Squidbillies. And then finally at the end, we have, let's see, just going to skip to Augustus's or Octavian's final speech about Mark Antony and Cleopatra. And let's see, he says, He says, most probable that she died. For her physician tells me she has pursued conclusions infinite of easy ways to die. Conclusions infinite because she's described as sort of an infinite woman. She has so many levels and sides to her personality. She's a complex human being, right? She's not all this or that. She's not all sad. She's not all vindictive. She's not all lustful, right? She's not all loving. She's many different things. Take up her bed and bear her women from the monument. She shall be buried by her Antony. No grave upon the earth shall clip in it a pair so famous. High events as these strike those that make them, and their story is no less in pity than his glory, which brought them to be lamented. Our army shall in solemn show attend this funeral, and then to Rome. Come, Dolabella, see high order in this great solemnity. And it ends like a tragedy, right? Just like Hamlet, it ends with the funeral. Now, one you may not realize this, but one reason that "Good Night, Sweet Prince," occurs in Hamlet, and that they bear the coffin off, they bear the body off. The practical reason for that is that the director and Shakespeare, the writer, have to get everybody off stage, right? There has to be a way to clear the stage at the end of the play, so they need an empty stage. So it's all stage directions. That's one of the great things with Shakespeare is that there's nothing accidental in his plays. There's nothing accidental in his text, in his words, in his speeches. Quadruple puns, pun upon pun upon pun. Everything is sort of interrelated, and it's even self-referential back to the other plays, which I find, just really fascinating and is emblematic of the way that art should work, right? Because art holds a mirror up to life, right? And symbolizes life and how life is complex, how events and people are interrelated and connect with one another, right? So that's it, you guys. That's my Antony and Cleopatra by Shakespeare, 1608. Great play. Again, I'm not one to, I didn't foresee myself doing this play. I just thought it would be really cool because, for one, we're going to be doing, we've done the 12 Caesars, we've done Julius Caesar, and we live in a world, in a system now that is sort of inherited from this Roman system. All of the machinations and the Machiavellian events, right, that occur on a daily basis and that infect and affect us are symbolized or occur in a sort of a microcosmic scale in these works of literature, right? And also, notably, I'm going to be going over The Belly of an Architect with, again, tomorrow night at 6. Please be here, you guys, with West Lexicon Media, Sole Purpose, ACR, Alternate Current Radio, our homeboy. And that movie, Peter Greenaway, 1987, cult classic, that movie is set in Rome, right? So we need to sort of lead up to modern Rome, and it will also have parts of it that are hearkening back to ancient Rome. And anybody who's ever been to Rome, shouts out to my sis. We went to Rome together, 2005 Christmas. Anybody who's ever spent time I've been to Rome twice. Anybody who's ever been to Rome, it's so amazing. You can still go to the Forum. It's still the same, right? You can still see the Pantheon. You can still, you can still go to where the Domus Aurea was. You can still go to the Colosseum, and the Circus Maximus is, kind of overrun with like a bunch of, it's got like wild dogs. But you can still go there. You can go to Nero's Crypta Portico, which is amazing. So yes, please, you guys, don't forget, before we get off here, please don't forget to support me. Shouts out again to Thomas Henderson, our homeboy Thomas Henderson, and to our homegirl, Kim. Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you so much for supporting me. I appreciate you. And, y'all, I couldn't really do it without you. And we're, again, hopefully the stream was better tonight in terms of the video and the audio quality. We're going to keep going. Next thing to get, is some good lights and good lights. Mike, we got to get a camera. And we're just trying to level up, you guys. We're trying to level up. We're gonna be streaming on a different platform later in the week. We won't be here on this one that we are right now. I mean, we're gonna be on YouTube, but we'll be streaming through a different platform. So I think you guys are gonna like it. We're gonna have Streamlabs donations up soon, hopefully this week. So that'll be cool. And let's see. Oh yeah, shouts out to our homegirl Kristen, Slow Boy Whiteboard, always supporting me. Thank you so much, Kristen. Appreciate you. You're so based. Thank you for that $5 donation. You are the best. And thank you, Adam Hirsch. Really appreciate you. $5. Thank you so much. Really appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. So you guys, let's get off. Let's go over to our homeboy, Church of the Eternal Logos, David Patrick Harry, who's streaming. And then, of course, we've got Jay Deasy at Jay's Analysis streaming tonight, 9 o'clock. He's got his event coming up. We'll let him talk about that. But hope you guys, hope we can all meet up there in person. How sweet would that be, you guys, if we could all hang out in person on July 30th, right? Saturday, July 30th in Nashville. That will be badass. I hope to see everybody there. That's going to be amazing. We can all hang out together. So throw your boy some gas money so I can get there. All right. So listen, I'll see y'all there. And also, I don't know if it'll be too late tonight, but again, one more time before we get off, I'm going to be doing this music analysis stream. I'm going to be doing song lyrics. And I'm not going to tell you what songs we're doing yet, but I will tell you the first one, and that's Stairway to Heaven. And we're going to be looking at these two books right here about Led Zeppelin. We're going to be analyzing the lyrics to Stairway to Heaven, the Gnostic, Luciferian, Freemasonic, Tarot Hermit deck, Bustle in Your Hedgerow lyrics. And we're going to be looking at some of Jimmy Page and Robert Plant's inspiration for the song and what it means and where it came from. So I think that's going to be pretty dope. Hope you guys enjoy that because I think it's going to be fun. So I'll probably be doing that tonight if it's not too late. We'll see how long JD goes, or definitely tomorrow. And then again tomorrow at 6 p.m. West Lex. So again, thank you so much. I love y'all, everybody. And I will see you. All right. I love y'all. Peace.